Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Doomer Optimism, where we have rotating hosts and very interesting guests. And today is no exception. We have Veerasamy, Visakan Veerasamy, I guess did I pronounce that right?
It's all good.
Yep. Also known as Visa online. For many people, he needs no introduction. I think I've known about Visa's accounts for at least 3 years. And one thing I've always admired about it is just how many kind of different subcultures that he was connected to and was able to kind of connect together. And it seems like I really want to get into kind of your vision and your life vision. But from my point of view, it really seems like you see so much untapped potential in humans, and especially humans that are really nerdy and really interested in really kind of narrow domains and might have trouble with embodiment and socialization, and you really want to kind of make them feel good, make them feel connected, connect them in kind of friends networks all around the world. And you see that this can really unleash just a lot of potential, a lot of creative potential that can solve some of our most difficult problems in the world, as well as just have fun. Is my perception of your vision, is that largely, I don't know, is it in alignment, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, that's great. So I think your description is slightly more focused. So you described like the nerds and the embodiment stuff, which is, I would say, is correct, but it isn't necessarily like a core focus for me. But like, so I have many different like rotating, shifting focuses at the same time. And I like that you observe that I'm kind of in between many different subcultures. And so I've come to think of myself as a sort of switchboard between cultures. I'm like in that interstitial space in between. And it really does. It's funny how when you look back, everything kind of adds up. Like, so I'm like a minority where I'm from. I'm from Singapore. And I've just always kind of straddled many different contexts, many different cultures in like even like social groups when I was a kid and all that sort of thing. And so it's always I've just been always naturally curious about like what's going on next door, what's going on across the street. I just want to know. And as a result, it's like, so I get a very high rate of people saying, oh my goodness, this is such a unexpected crossover. Like I'm on a podcast with like a comedian from Australia, or I'm on like something from somewhere else, and people like, I did one call with some gamers who play Smash, like just all these things that people might have previously associated as different parts of their life. Like, oh, I follow Visa on Twitter and it's all these Twitter friends. And then I have this other interest set. And like, oh, what is he doing over there? It's like seeing your teacher at the supermarket or something. But yeah, I've just always been very passionate about trying to get to know everyone and see everything and do everything. And regarding a vision, I just, yeah, you got the nail on the head, which is like, just we can do so much more, and there's so much opportunity that people don't really see, I think, because they are focused on what is immediately around them. So I've always had I don't think of myself as like a historian per se. Like I'm just a casual curious nerd. But even when I was a kid, I used to go to the library and I would read about like ancient Egypt and Rome and all those things, just get a really broad sense of time and space. And so I've always kind of naturally gravitated towards thinking on those sort of time scales. So even when I was a teenager, I used to play in like my local music scene. I used to play in a band. And I was always like, oh my goodness, why is everyone sort of trapped in these local, very, very hyper small local, like inter-band conflicts, like inter-band politics. Like the scene is so small and the people in that scene were so consumed by like intra-scene politics. And I'm like, guys, like we are artists, right? And we want to see the arts flourish. And look, there's like comedians over there and they have their own thing. And there's like photographers and, videographers over there and they have their own thing. And we could all, we could like network together and trade together and then we can all flourish together. Like I've always been like that. Yeah. And so it's kind of amazing to look back and I feel like there were times where I sort of, so when I was in my 20s, when I started working and I was like overwhelmed with like my bills and everything, I kind of walked away from all that for a while, or I turned it down. And it's funny to now be more free again and to see that, oh, that spark never died. Like, I just always still been interested in that. Yeah.
I'll have to say, Visa, your take on Twitter in particular, the way that you thread things and you thread threads, and you are very, very open about all of the things you are, like all the facets that make up Visa. That was incredibly influential to me, because I also have been kind of like, it's been very difficult for me to understand how I should present myself online, because I also spent 10 years trying to be a professional musician, right? So I have 46 plus songs recorded that you can read online. I've written 2 fictional novels. I've written tons of nonfiction essays. I've been a marketer. I've been a banker. I've been like all of these things. And I'm deeply interested in ecology and conservation and things like that. And so then, the marketing mindset, something you said you write very early on in Introspect, is that the marketing vision is niche, focus, 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 hammer the one point home. And I've always been like, well, that's not me. How do I present all the facets of me? And seeing the way that you do it has been incredibly influential to me personally. But I think it also has clearly been influential to your corner of the internet, because you kind of see more and more people kind of mimicking the Visa thread of threads, right? That has become a thing. And I don't know if there was a prior for you that you lifted that from someone else or what, but it's definitely, you can see like all roads, at least in many of these circles, kind of all roads kind of lead back to Visa in some way. I will say, even this podcast, because I found out about Jason because you retweeted him, or you quote tweeted him. And then I found Jason led me to Ashley, and then me and Ashley and Jason came up with the idea of the podcast. So it was like,
oh, that's beautiful.
That's why I was like, man, if I could get
you're responsible for us, better or worse, Visa.
Yeah, you're responsible. At least 1/3 responsible for it.
I love to hear it. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
What you were asking about, like the threads. So so even before I was like on Twitter much, I've always been very prolific online. And I've also always had like this sort of historian list making impulse. I never used the word historian back then. So lately, because I've been reading history and I've been talking to historians, the word history has been coming up. But like I didn't set out to be that. I just like making lists, and I liked seeing continuity in things. So, I remember the first person I saw doing threads was Mark Andreessen back in like 2013 or so, 2014. And that was before the threading functionality was a thing. So he would just literally number his tweets. And then I have a friend, Ryan, and he was replying to his old tweets. And I was like, holy shit, how do you do that? How do you find these old tweets? And he's like, oh, you can use this /search to find your old tweets. So then I started replying to old tweets and so I've always had a very fragmented, chaotic mind. Like I just have a lot of things on my mind all the time. And it always frustrated me when I would be having a conversation with someone and they would say something and I'm like, oh my God, that reminds me exactly of something else. But I can't quite find it. I got to like think for it and I got to look for it. And half the time I don't get it. So I've always been like, okay, I want to just connect things together and I want to, keep track of everything. And yeah, so the thread of threads thing kind of just organically happened as a result of that. So I was already being very prolific. So like before I start, so my Twitter account is pretty old. I started tweeting in like I made my account in 2008 and I barely tweeted at all because I didn't have any reason to. But where was I going to go with that? Even on like Facebook and stuff, I would be posting stuff and referencing it back, and I would be trying to keep notes on things. I think it always bothered me that at some point when I was about maybe 20, 22, 23, around there, it really troubled me that there were these like narrative cycles in the media. So like local media in Singapore, for example, like I've noticed that every 2 or 3 years, there would be this big blow up discussion about certain topics. So one is like artists in Singapore can't make a living or something. Like somebody makes like some artist complains or they say they're going to leave the country because there's no opportunity here or whatever. And then there's this, it just follows this whole cycle. It's this very predictable pattern. Like somebody else responds and someone else, you know, pulls out the stats and someone else does it. And it's so predictable. And also another one is like on education, like you know, our education system is so difficult for people to express themselves, and everyone's like this pressure cooker environment. No one's, and the thing there'll be like it'll blow up on Reddit, for example, and there'll be like 300, 400 comments, and it'll be a great conversation, but it won't go anywhere from there. And then the whole thing will just repeat itself 2 years later. And I saw this happening 2 years later. Like, I'm like, why can't we just pick up where we left off? Like, why can't we just, you know, like instead of reinventing everything all over again, which is people just sort of discharging their emotions in the moment, which is something that people need. But I'm like, what if we had continuity though? What if we, you know, we could reference the past conversation and move forward with that? And so I guess that that feeling is really that it's a sense of despair almost. You know, it's like I'm idealistic and I want to believe that we can change things, but like I see these cycles and I see people not referencing and revisiting the past, and I'm like, I kind of committed myself to, okay, I'm gonna, you know, the next time this happens, I'm gonna like bring up a summary of all the things that happened before and all the times we've talked about it before. And and that I feel like people respond. It's been amazing for me to witness how people light up when they see that. You know, it's like they didn't expect that you can do that. So some people DM me about it, or, you know, email me and stuff, and they said that I was feeling depressed and like powerless, you know, kind of whatever. And then I saw that you have this ongoing thing, and it just feels like it feels less overwhelming and chaotic. And actually, what's his name? Alain de Botton. I don't know if I got his name right. He talks about this in his book, The News, where he's writing a commentary on like mainstream media and how it affects people's thinking and perspective and everything. And he says, he complains about the same thing. He's like, we receive news in these like fragmented daily sound bites and stuff, and you don't have time to make sense of it. Like, what does this mean? Where does it, what, you know, what is it? And I think the how he described it was, you know, you see a story about like a landlord evicting you know, a tenant or something, and you just see it as like one thing. But he said you should see it as part of like society is having this ongoing conversation over years and years about what does property mean, what does ownership mean, you know, what are our responsibilities to each other. So there's really like tons of philosophy embedded in every news story that nobody kind of takes the time to get into, because like, oh, there's the next news story, oh, then there's the next news story. So yeah, I've always just wanted just to contextualize things. And so a kick I've been going on recently, while writing my book, I found, so Nietzsche had this quote about having a historical sense, and he felt that, you know, it's crazy that he talked about this hundreds of years ago. And actually, you can go all the way back to like Pericles at his funeral oration in Athens, and you look at Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And both of those speeches, Pericles' funeral oration and Lincoln's Gettysburg's address, so Lincoln's is much shorter, but they both do the same thing. There's like a pattern that they both go through, and the thing that they do is leadership. That's really good. And the first thing they do is they situate people in history. So, you know, Lincoln says 40 and so years ago, our ancestors, our forefathers came and they had this thing. And Pericles is like, you know, like before the war, our ancestors, they did this. And that's what you don't see in news articles, right? In news articles, it's like, today, this thing happened somewhere and this bad thing happened. And people like, they freak out. They get decontextualized. They don't know how to situate themselves in history, in space, and just very deep, very fragmented and chaotic. And it's a real act of service for someone to be like, all right, this is the story so far. This is where we've been coming from. These are all the crazy things that have happened. You know, this is what this means to me. This is what, you know, the bigger struggle that we are participating in. Here's what we can do. And that's leadership. And that really gives people a sense of belonging, right? It gives people a sense of community. It's all kinds, and to me, it's almost seems trivial. Like you can read about it in like a blog. I'm going to write one, I think. But like you can read about it in like a blog post and be like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that for my friends. I can do that in my own life. I can do that for other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exciting.
Yeah, this really this actually ties to one of the questions that was proposed, where they mentioned they tagged one of your old threads about having ADHD and using it to your advantage. And it seems like kind of what you're describing is our culture at large has ADHD, where we get distracted, where we lose context. And you yourself have described that you kind of have, you know, ADHD type of personality, but you've figured out how to use it to your advantage, how to use kind of the digital tools, the internet, to actually like it's a skill set in a way. People in society see it as like, oh, you know, that's a problem, but it's also a skill set. And if you channel it correctly, it can actually help to build kind of what I would call a situated cognition in culture, of creating back that context, right? So you're using your personal ADHD to help our culture overcome its cultural ADHD and actually weave in the context again. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I love that you said weave, because you know, I do think that it's a very shamanic thing to do. And I think there's like parallel, if you investigate like historically just what shaman did in different environments, right? It's like, and it's the same Pericles Lincoln thing. So I would almost go so far as to say that Pericles and Lincoln were shaman, right? In that they wove the symbols of their culture in a way that provided the story for people to inhabit. And you know, part of, you know, so we can talk for hours about ADHD as well, but like just kind of really quickly, I would say that it's a kind of, you know, so I'm reading, I just started reading Scattered Minds, and one of the analogies he uses early on is like, it's like you're in a crowded room and just tons of people are talking around you, and then someone asks you, what did so and so say? And it's just that sense that a lot of people are talking around you, even when you're alone, just feel like things are going on all the time. It's sensitivity, really, right? And sensitivity is both a strength and a weakness at the same time. And whether or not it's one or the other depends on the context, and depends on how, you know, like you would want such a person in some contexts and you wouldn't want such a person in some other context, depending on what your situation is. And I would say that broadly, the mainstream culture that we're in is just not very friendly to people like that in their sort of early stages of development. But again, like if you learn to channel it, so one of the metaphors I like to use is it's like a chain gun. You know, it's like big, heavy, unwieldy, hard to aim, hard to control, but it jams easily, but it's very, very powerful and prolific. And yeah, you can kind of, and they don't teach you how to use it. You know, you sort of go to school, and school is like handgun training, sort of like everyone just using the same small tool with the same, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's like different, again, you want different people with different skills to use their skills where it's appropriate. And yeah, I feel like there is, so I don't want to over generalize and project my experience onto everybody else, but I feel like I was almost, you know, so in my internal mental shorthand, I use words like destined, sort of just to be dramatic for myself. But like, it almost feels like, given my circumstances and my conditions and whatever, I was almost destined to investigate the cultural space around me and try to make sense of it, and try to like what you said, weave, right? Like really weave together all these random threads and ideas of whatever's going on around me, and just try to make sense of that in a tapestry. And once you externalize that out of you, other people can kind of interface with it and look at it. And I think it's very sad sometimes when I hear from people who are struggling with ADHD, they DM me and they're like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so overwhelmed, there's so much chaos, there's so everything. And I'm like, just write stuff down, man, or like do something, make something, like just have the stuff outside your head. Like it's chaos inside your head because there's so much possibility and so much, you know, different ways you could theoretically imagine things. But if you just get stuff out of your head and put it around you, so it's like you know, it's cognition extended beyond your internal head and like around you. And like we don't have a lot of that, right? Like you know, so it's, what if what we think is a disorder is just a different order, right? It's a different way of organizing. And yeah, it's just that the way things are set up is not well suited to people with different minds and different styles and so on.
Yeah, I wonder how much modern sense of timekeeping somewhat affects that, because I on that ADHD thread, you kind of point, you know, earlier in that thread, you point to like Beethoven and all these historical figures who were just copious note takers. Like they just kept notes everywhere. They put notes on everything. You look at Leonardo da Vinci's like notebooks, right? You have like you know, Vitruvian Man, and then you've got like his to-do list, his shopping list, right in the corner, right? And it's just absolute just chaos. I mean, you look at it and it's chaos, but it's actually, you know, genius projected onto paper, right? And I wonder if like timekeeping, the railroad timekeeping that is the modern way of timekeeping, requires, boom, you got to be here at 12 o'clock sharp, where prior to that, for 10,000 plus years, humans were just like, be there when the sun is at its highest peak, around about, you know? And so you'd have much more time to just sort of flow with your thoughts, with the natural world. Society was organized in such a way. And now it's just like time, you got to keep time. And it's really not very conducive to the ramblings of a ADHD mind.
Yeah, there's this great book by Jay Griffiths called A Sideways Look at Time, and she talks about this all the time. Like the whole book is about that. And yeah, you know, it's like before railroads, people, there would be multiple times at the same time. So you would think about things like, oh, it's the 72nd year of this king's reign. It's been 6 years since this drought. Like, you know, and we do this too. We're like, it's been 2 years of the pandemic. Like, it's a natural human impulse to delineate time through experience, and like this sort of rigorous imposition of like a centralized top-down time is just not organic. And you know, like one of the notes I wrote for myself when reading Jay Griffith's Sideways Look at Time is like, how much of the things that we think is, oh, there's something wrong with me, I'm so stressed all the time, I'm so whatever, like we live in calendars. And what if calendars are just not designed for human flourishing? What if you're just not supposed to have 5 days on, 2 days off, you know? And like just subjecting yourself to that is something that will make you intrinsically a little bit miserable in some way. Like there's it's not emergent from our biology. It's imposed downwards from authority, right? And that's for the convenience of the system. It's not for the convenience of the individual. There's this great blog post by my friend Florian. He calls it the tough tomato principle. And he just talks about industrialization and how, you know, tomatoes have been bred like through human selection to be tougher to survive the industrial process. And you know, it's magical that we do have tomatoes in every supermarket in the world, and it's like the miracle of shipping and markets and all of those things. But at the same time, tomatoes are straight up just tougher, and you know, there's like the deliciousness of a tomato is not the primary variable that is considered in the production of tomatoes. And again, like some people will get upset about this or angry or whatever, right? But it's, you know, I think it's just useful just to be aware of that fact. Like, okay, like we've, as a species, we've made this choice, and like we value you know, cheap tomatoes over delicious tomatoes, broadly speaking. And we ourselves are also tough tomatoes. You know, we have been born and raised and bred and schooled and everything to withstand the industrial process of civilization. And just as tomatoes are tough and not as juicy as they could be, like people, you know, we repress our emotions, and we, you know, we sleep and we wake up with alarm clocks and all that. And it's easy to kind of like spiral away into that and be into like despairing, like, oh my God, it's like, you know, I'm a rat in a cage. And yeah, I think there's some truth to that, and it's worth kind of feeling those emotions. But also, you know, it's a trade-off that we've made. Like it's what, like all the beauty of civilization. We can have this conversation because there are microphones and internet and all of those things. So it's like, how do we kind of so now that we are aware of that, how do we kind of get the best of both worlds, right? Like how do we diminish the, like, can we continue to have tomatoes that are, you know, widely available but maybe less tough, like, you know, stuff like that, figuring that out. It's an interesting challenge.
I want to pick up on something you said a little bit earlier about kind of extending your cognition into something physical and actually making something, you know, perhaps starting with lists. And I think, I mean, that's a big crossover theme with Doomer Optimism, you know, of where, you know, one way we put it is, you know, we've become too consumeristic, where we consume too much and we have to actually produce more. And now, of course, many of us have jobs in a highly specialized economy, and so we are kind of producing in some really abstract sense, but for many people, it's just not very satisfying because they don't actually see the fruits of their labor. So, you know, a big theme for us is just like, you know, make things, right? Learn how to, and this could be make art, but it can also be, you know, there's a heavy emphasis on like food production, like, you know, make some of your own food. You're probably not going to grow all of your own food, but, you know, if you can grow some tomatoes, right, that are juicy, that is a very satisfying process. And that could be also whatever it is, making clothing, right? If you have your own kind of fashion sense, you can make your own clothing. I just found that interesting that there's kind of I feel like there's a strong overlap there in our sensibilities.
Yeah, I also, I think I recently read something about how much consumerism was really a psyop, like in post-World War II. So like if
Right.
you just before too, people were buying and selling stuff, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
I mean, okay, like you can nitpick on this based on like the 20s and like when did advertising become a thing, marketing, blah, blah, blah. But just if you squint and just see the broadest strokes, like we pretty much psyoped ourselves at some point to be more consumerist. And even then, it's like there was like some reason to it, it's like wartime GDP stuff, like it's messy and convoluted. But yeah, I would say the tragic thing is like I don't feel like it's necessary to necessarily be like oh, we have to shut down our consumption, and some people do that. Some people are like, oh, you got to completely degrowth and completely and I think that's maybe some people can handle that and maybe it's good for them, but it doesn't seem super realistic to me to kind of shock people into that sort of sudden decrease in consumption. But yeah, I'm completely on board with people should make stuff. Like, even if you see, I love seeing like the Kung Bushmen, they have these beautiful beads that they weave, right, for themselves. And there's stories in their initiation rituals and stuff. And it's just so, like, you can sense the story and the meaning that they put into the things that they make for themselves. And yeah, I think it's really, if you can't like change much about your life, you can at least spend like 20 minutes a week just doing something for yourself. Like maybe just drawing something on pen and paper and it's shitty, but like that is an act of rebellion and an act of self-expression that changes the ontology of, I am a consumer, I'm a I have a job and I have to make money and I have to spend money. And I think a lot of people really do have this thing where they feel the opportunity cost of not like making more money and participating in that sort of mainstream value system. And I'm not saying we need to like rip the system apart and well, depends how many drinks I've had, but it's like I think what I want to convey really is that the smallest acts of like once a week I will have 1 hour for myself that I do whatever I want, and I will not sell that hour to anybody for any amount of money, right? Like it's sacred to me, and it's sacred. That's what religion, at its best it should be like. But even if you read like 1500s, like people have been complaining about how it's like the way that religion has been expressed in communities and all that ends up being hypocritical and all that. So it's not like there was some past where humans were not hypocrites and everyone was beautiful and perfect. Like even ancient Rome people were complaining, but like the underlying principle, I think, or the beauty is if you can carve out some small space in your life to play music for yourself and like you don't give a shit if anybody else cares, that I think is an expression of self-sovereignty, and people feel a relief doing that, and they feel just less overwhelmed by the marching treadmill of right. Like, oh, you better spend every last minute being productive, like that 20 minutes to an hour once a week of fuck you, no, I'm gonna do what I want instead. Like it's psychologically relieving. Yeah. You might say it's as like, so for if you want to get dark about it, like people in prison, like that 1 hour of whatever of sunlight that they can get, it can really keep them alive in a way. Like, so like removing that is like the even worse punishment. Like they're already kind of incarcerated and not like their freedom is taken away and all that, but like that little tiny space to express oneself. And I was reading this poem by this I think he's Iranian guy who was he was a political prisoner for something, and he wrote this poem that was like while he was in prison, and the lines were something like, the tyrants can demand the smashing of every lamp where lovers meet, but they can't smash the moon, and as long as the moon is there, like there will always be a light for love. I'm like, oh, so beautiful. He wrote this while he was in prison, and he said something like, really like the feeling of wholesome, of like beauty that I feel in this prison cell while ruminating on love and the moon and lovers. It's like he experienced the freedom in prison, expressing himself, that a lot of people in like contemporary society who have like lots of money and lots of everything, they don't feel it because they didn't make it. They're not making anything. They don't get to express themselves. They don't, consider the meaning. And that's like, once you see things this way, it's like, you can't shut up about it, because it's such a radical shift. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to
go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, Jason.
No, go ahead. I thought you would pause, so go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to kind of talk about your work process. I think there was a lot of questions, and that resonated with my own questions, is that you are incredibly prolific, and you're very open and online about your work process. I was thinking, I was telling Jason over DM last night that I think it's so funny. Like, imagine if Stephen King, while he was writing a novel, was telling us all about how awesome he thought this novel was, or like, I'm really stuck on this spot. Y'all, can you help me out? I want to work this through with you all. Instead, we get, with modern contemporary, like, artists, we get their work fully fledged. That's what we get. And then we get to pick it apart without, it's kind of a black box, right? But you're incredibly open about the process of the work you're doing throughout the process. So I'm kind of curious about how you landed on that kind of as a work process. And then B, how much does the process itself influence the work? And I'm just really fascinated by this as a process.
I love that you observe this and you point it out, because so I wouldn't explicitly make this like my bio or something, but part of how I approach this is like, there's the work that I put out, and I think it's pretty decent, pretty good. But like, the cooler thing that I'm doing is the performance art of making the art, right? Like, it's just like I'm making stuff in public, and I know for a fact that there are people who are watching me and they feel emboldened to do their own thing because they see how that guy is doing it. And I think a big part of it is really just, I wanted to see this myself. Like, when I was a kid, like, I loved books, and I was a library nerd, and I loved books, and I didn't have anyone around me who was an author. And so I didn't have access to that process. And so I vaguely knew that, someday I would like to be an author, but I don't really know how to do it. I don't really know. So it's a sort of like open garage tinkering mindset. And anytime I ever saw any creative share their process anyway, I was always in love straight away. I was like, it's so nice of you to share this with me. It's like, I would say that, like, yeah, I didn't have creative people in my life sharing stuff with me like that. And I desperately wanted it when I was a kid. So I'm like, I wanted to share that for the next kid, right? I sort of made like a pact with myself when I was a kid. I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out and I'm gonna share it with the next kid, so that they, if they are stumbling around in the comments blindly and they stumble onto me, they can do that. And how has it informed the work? I think, yeah, the great thing about building in public is that it also kind of guarantees that you won't fall into the trap of making something that nobody wants. And that's something I've always worried about. I think it's horrifying to me to consider the prospect of, imagine you spend like 5 years working on a novel, and then like you publish it and like nobody wants to read it and nobody cares. It's like, and it might be great. It might be a really good novel, right? That maybe posthumously people are like, holy shit, this guy was a genius. Like, I don't want to be a posthumous genius. I'm kind of selfish. I want to be appreciated while I'm alive, And yeah, and I want other people to be appreciated while they're alive. There's this really, really sad story about this the guy who invented LEDs before LEDs were popularized. This Russian guy named Vladimir Losev, I think. I don't know if that's his first name, but his last name is Losev, Losev. And he was like this solitary nerd, just tinkering on his own. And I think he had like wealthy parents maybe, but like he was bad at socializing. At some point, he like wrote a letter to Einstein, but Einstein was so overwhelmed with letters at that point, he didn't see it, or he didn't, he just is just floundering in obscurity. And if he had the right advocate, if somebody had kind of, if he could have had Twitter, for example, right, and he could have just tweeted his ideas, and somebody could have seen it and like quote tweeted, retweet, share, DM someone else, hey, you should look at this, and then it gets to prominence. Like we could have advanced that technology by like a couple of decades at least, you know, and that just continues to blow my mind. It's like, how many LOCEFs are there out there right now that we don't know about because they're kind of just floundering in silence and secrecy? And yeah, so part of why I do what I do is that I want to normalize this kind of behavior, like just share your stuff and also kind of talk to other people. I think you know, like while social media has been around for like a decade at least, our thinking about it is still very much informed by like broadcast media and like one way individual to mass audience, one way sort of broadcast thinking. And the analogy I love to always use is I talk about Jimi Hendrix. So Hendrix, you know, so the electric guitar was first invented around like 1930-ish, 32, 33, depending on how precisely you want to define it. And it, for like the first 2 decades of the electric guitar existing, everyone looked at it and thought, oh, it's like a guitar. The tone is not as nice, but it's louder, you know, so I'm just going to play it like a regular guitar that I can amplify to people. And Hendrix came along and he's like, we can do crazy shit with this, you know. We can like put the pickups in the amp, and we can pull the whammy bar and can add a filter. And he completely questioned what an electric guitar is and what you can do with it, and you can use it as a lead instrument. Like nobody really thought about it at the time. They just thought of it as like almost like a lyre or whatever. And you know, there's no reason why Hendrix technically couldn't have done what, like, or somebody couldn't have done what Hendrix did like 30 years earlier. It's just that it took somebody who was born later to kind of experience, to grow up without the assumptions that the predecessors had. Like he didn't assume that it wasn't something, it was what it was before. And I feel like it's kind of true that social media is still like this, and so we have like tremendous, you know, celebrities on social media. We have people with millions of Instagram followers, you know, hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers. And yet I still feel like people don't realize that you can host discussions, right? At any time you can ask a question and have like, if you have some medium amount of clout, you can introduce people to each other at scale at a level that has never been done before in human history. And people don't see, from my point of view, I'm crazy all the time because I don't see people seeing this. It feels like people are still thinking I want lots of followers so that I can, you know, get an ad deal and sell products, which is, I mean, fine, get that back, you know, like if it allows you to exit the rat race or whatever, like cool. Like I think that's a decent thing to aspire towards. But it's like, yeah, there's this one track mind of, you know, I'm gonna build an audience and I will sell them stuff, and you know, or you know, I joke when I'm feeling cynical, I joke like people aspire to be like human billboards. I'm like, why? Like you can instead, I'm again, I don't want to be like shitting on people who sell products and whatever, like make a living however you make it. But like there's just so much opportunity to invite people to participate in a space, right? And it's like, it's just, you know, like there are people who are like Twitch streamers and vloggers and stuff, and I feel like they all don't know their own power. Like they don't know the potential of what they have. Like they have huge audiences, but you know, they don't invite them into the process. And so, I mean, maybe I'm missing, like there are some people who are already doing this at a scale that I have not witnessed yet. I think, for example, Hank and John Green, like, so they have pretty large audiences, and they do a pretty good job of kind of encouraging people to step up a little bit. But like, I feel like we can go even further than that. Like we can really be, you know, individuals who onboard and welcome other people to being creative, and then you have like this whole creative seed. So that's kind of what I think we can do. Yeah, I kind of drifted a little bit from the original question, but
see, I think this is a very brilliant turn in the conversation, because I had kind of noted as I was reading, I'm a very slow reader, so I didn't get very far into introspect, but I tried to get as far as I could, so I'd have some basis here. I find it very interesting is that you seem to be relatively egoless online. That you're obviously, I mean, but even when you have ego, even when you're sort of self-aggrandizing, you're always very careful to note that you're aware that you're self-aggrandizing, you know? And I think that I'm not sure that many people are actually online to network or create social connection. I think it's sort of like the people who can become national politicians in the US. It's almost like there's a certain level of sociopathy that even allows you to make those types of decisions. I mean, think about a CEO who has to, like, with a stroke of a pen, ruin 10,000 people's livelihoods, right? That just to make that decision, you have to be able to think of, these are humans and these are not humans, right? You have to be able to make the what is the trolley question. You have to be able to make that constantly. And I think that social media attracts people who want to be viewed. They want the adulation. They don't want this. They don't want it to be a two-way street, because there's a level of giving up control. I mean, me and Jason Ashley have repeatedly had conversations about, you know, how do we move Doomer Optimism to be a thing without it being our thing, right? But at the same time, we also want some control over, like, the direction. And it's a very, I mean, this is like classic community organizing, like, questions. How do you build a movement without leaders? And I find it very interesting, because I think that your online project is very much striking at the heart of this, is trying to find a balance of creating a movement or creating a network of people, while maintaining your singular voice, you know, without being about everybody, and then everyone forgets about Visa and forget that you started it and you're just one of the nodes, you know. I think this is all very fascinating. I think that your project is, you know, by being hyper online, by being very open about what you do, it is somewhat egoless. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, you can criticize me throughout the entire process, and it's going to maybe have an effect, maybe not. I'm still the artist. I'm still in control of this world that I'm building. There wasn't a question in that. I just wanted to comment.
I mean, I'm very heartened that you observe this. And I mean, so when you were saying about Duma Optimism, I think, you know, the fact that you call it Duma Optimism and not, you know, the Tressa and Jason show, I think that's already, you know, you've already kind of set it up in a way that sort of invites people to interpret it however they want to interpret it. I think that's healthy. You know, so like I'm thinking of starting a separate blog that is kind of further out from myself, and like I ask people for like to suggest names. And people are suggesting like vis-a-vis and like clever things that are based on my name. And I'm like, no, I don't want it to be my name. You know, I want the project to outlast me when I'm gone, right? And regarding ego, you know, I mean, I do have an ego, but like, I think the way to kind of approach this in a healthy way is it's probably really just to have something in your mind, something that you care about greater than yourself. And so, like, for some people, it might be religion. For me, you know, so I have this blog post called The Library Ethos, where I basically describe the project of like intellectual work and art and like making music and it's like the library is my church, you know, like, and like a global distributed meaning making people throughout. I consider, you know, everyone from Emerson and Goethe and Nietzsche, like they're all like my family, you know, it's like literally they're my predecessors, and I want to honor them with the work that I do, and I want to set things up for the next 1,000 years of people who are going to do the same work. And so like for me to be like, you know, and get a load of me, right, like that kind of distracts from that project. David Ogilvy has this great phrase that's like, strive for the company of immortals, you know, like for Valhalla, right? There's kind of, and it's liberating in a way. It frees you up from having to like defend yourself too much. And I think it's healthy to know that nobody really knows anybody else. Like we barely know ourselves, right? Like it's just we project some image, we have some story and whatever, and that can change and everything. So it's like, you know, I think it's good to have like a diverse set of close friends from different contexts who give you feedback and be like, hey, that you can go to and be like, hey, did I go too far with this? And then be like, no, you're good. Yeah, that's kind of worrying. And then you kind of work through that. But yeah, you know, I've investigated things like, you know, what is narcissism? What is humility? You know, like all these things really matter to me. I mean, if you want to get into like the backstory of it, I was kind of I would say I was kind of a narcissistic teenager, not in like a I mean, as a kid, as an idiot kid who was like just kind of get a load of me. And I didn't like, so I had, it hurt some of my friends, or like, it frustrated, annoyed them and stuff. And I didn't like that. I was like, I don't want to be hurting people unnecessarily. So I was like, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. What did I do wrong? How do I fix it? And what I feel is that the way our culture, or like broader culture, talks about things like narcissism and humility and all these things, it's very convoluted. It's almost counterproductive. Like, it doesn't help, and I feel like, so with humility, for example, some people feel that simply choosing to speak up in public is arrogant, because who the hell are you, and why do you think what you're saying is anything like anything that anybody should listen to? Like, why do you think we should listen to you? And my frame is like, I don't tweet because I'm arrogant, or I don't write publicly because I'm arrogant. I do it because I'm the opposite of that. Like, I how can I figure out what's wrong with what I think and say unless someone else points it out to me? Like, am I supposed to figure it out all inside my own head? Like, that would be arrogant of me to think that I can just sit down and think and have all the right opinions and all the right, So it's, for me, it's like producing in public is like a way to invite the world to interface with me. And I guess, yeah, and that's another like childhood shit thing for me. Like, I've always just craved connection with other people. Like, I felt like when I was a kid, like people would tell me stuff and condescend to me, or just react in ways that just didn't feel like it was connecting. And so I've always just genuinely wanted to connect with other people, and like, what's on your mind? What's your life like? How does it feel like to be you? And being able to provide that space for other people, which I didn't have much of when I was a kid, to me, that's very, very healing. It's like, it feels so good to see people come together in my mentions or whatever. And so, like, anything I do that worsens that, I try to stay away from generally. And anything I can do to make that better, I try to lean into that. And so I think it's really trying to do work that the people that I respect and admire can respect in turn has kind of kept me on a path of like walking the tightrope properly. And I do describe being extremely online is like a psychological extreme sport. It really is. Like, the more followers you get, like, so it's like, as you grow in followers, for example, invariably things you say will be interpreted in negative lights by people who don't know who you are and don't know the context. And like, you say something kind of innocently, innocuously, but it pokes them in their trauma, for example, and then they lash out back in response. And if you have enough people lashing out at you from different angles, or even just saying shit randomly, some of them are going to stab you in your trauma, right? And then you're going to get fucked up, and then you're going to respond in a way that it's overreacts. So it's really, if you're going to like walk into the whirlwind, like, you have to have a very, very grounded sense of self. And I guess a part of me kind of, it's almost, it's like, if I want to be dark about it, it's almost like a kind of suicidally martyry thing. Like, even as a musician, when I was a teenager, I was like, I want to go on stage and say how I feel, and if people decide that I should be destroyed for it, for whatever, then I choose destruction. I rather kind of be destroyed by the truth and of my feelings than like live a life where I feel like I'm faking and pretending and hiding all the time. I've seen people who kind of go too far with that extreme. So there's like a threshold there where, so like Kurt Cobain had a quote that was like, I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be that binary. You don't have to be like, you can kind of carry both of you at the same time and try to manage it healthily. And I think so that actually brings up another thing that I wanted to bring up in relation to like the CEO thing and the politician thing, which is that a lot of the problems of growth and a lot of the problems of like crazy decisions, I think, can be, I don't know if I would say they can be solved, but they can be diminished by being willing to play a longer game. Right. So very, very often it's like, if you feel that you want to start a company and you want to grow it really fast, then like you're running out of money and you're like, I need to sell more product. And then like, if we don't sell this product, we run out of business. And then you're like, so we got to do some, like kind of gray area marketing stuff. Like, the problem there started all the way at the start when you got too excited and you started a company and you kind of set up yourself for like potential failure. And the way, so my approach to these things is, take your time with it, do things informally, keep your like expenses as low as you can, right? And build relationships with people over a long period of time so that you get to see who's like serious about stuff and who's just kind of glory seeking in the short run, or they want to make a lot of money and they want to whatever. So like sometimes I tell people I have like a 50-year vision, and then sometimes people come along and they kind of offer me like the Peter Thiel questions, like why can't you compress it into like 3 years? You know, what if you do it? I'm like, no, because the people who want to do it in 3 years are willing to do horrible shit that I don't want to do, right? And they are willing to, and it just changes the thing, right? Like when you have a 50-year long game, you're like, oh, you got people are going to have kids, people are going to move, people are going to go through a lot of life changes, and like that kind of longer view is just, it's conducive to something that isn't a part of like our day-to-day. It's just very beautiful, I feel, to have the reassurance that several of my friends, we are gonna, if we're all alive, hopefully, right, and the world isn't completely gone to hell, that we will be able to catch up decades from now, and we will still be, you know, like, I think that itself is a kind of meta project that more people should do. I think it happens in small communities. So one of my favorite people is his name is Uri Buri, and he's somewhere in Israel, the place is called Akko, and he's like this. He's like the town historian. He's like the town. He runs an ice cream parlor. He's like the switchboard of that town. Everyone loves him. Everyone goes to him to mediate disputes and trusts him. And he's like the local village sort of. You know, like I say king. You know, like, and when I say king, I really mean self-sovereign, honoring the sovereignty of other people. Like he's not lording over other people, right? Like he's really more of an informal mayor that people go to because they love him and trust him. And I kind of want to be like Uri Buri at scale. Like I want to help mint more Uri Buris everywhere, like just community leaders, people that other people trust. And if you're like, oh, I'm going to run for office, like, you know, like, so we do need good people in office everywhere. But like, I personally feel that political office is outdated technology. Like it's thousands of years old, and it's very much, you know, like even like in Singapore, which is a small country, so like local government and so-called federal government is the same thing, and it's like, you know, like our parliamentarians that live amongst us and can go and see. It's a different vibe. But even then, I remember I went to sit in on my parliament, and I was like, which citizens can do, and I was just sitting there for like hours, and it's just so slow, and it's like all these people. I mean, I respect and appreciate the ceremony of the tradition. Like it's nice that people prioritize, let's all come together and talk about our issues of national importance. But like, you know, we have like Reddit now and Twitter and all these, like we don't need to limit discussions of national issues to the bandwidth of one person talking for a couple of hours at a time, and that's it. Like we can really, you know, open up the debate and like involve. But to do that, you need like good moderators. Another thing that I'm crazy about all the time is that if you go like in my country's local Facebook pages for the politicians, it's like a politician's Facebook page could be a space where people have intelligent discussion. Like I'm revealing my idealism here, but I really believe it's possible. You could have like a dozen people who are passionate about the local issues, having constructive, meaningful, interesting conversations there. But you go there and it's like everyone's just like reacting with reaction images and emojis, and it's just noise. It's like I'm like, we could be furthering, you know, we could be forging a more perfect union, right? We could be coming to a better understanding of ourselves. But that does require, you know, like in the context of politicians can't really moderate. Like they're obliged to sort of let every citizen speak. Like, so you can't silence a citizen. Well, you know, theoretically, like by right, the virtue of public office is you shouldn't silence your electorate by right. But you know, like if it's private citizens, and you know, Pericles was a private citizen, and that's people went to he was like the Uri Buri of Athens, and he helped Athens come to its golden age. And it gets more complex, like he funneled money from the Delian League. Anyway, there's just this sense of we could have people organizing communities independently without being like, oh, we're gonna start a company, oh, we're gonna start a organization that has customers or has, and you know, it's like that there's a lot of potential beauty in the informal spaces between us, and people just don't respect that or appreciate that, or the people who have appreciated it, they historically they've been kind of sidelined. And so Jane Jacobs talks about this stuff a lot beautifully, right? Or just the like, you know, like how people give their key when they're when they having someone else over, for example, like you need to pass a key to someone else and you're leaving town for a week or whatever, you give your key to your local meat shop, your butcher or like whoever's down the street. And the butcher does that as a service, as like just as a communitarian thing. He's not, and like the modern response would be like, oh, we should have like an app, and we should start a company, and it's like you give your key to the thing, and then there's like you can track the data, and then you can, like there's monetizables. I'm like, fuck it, like just let people take care of each other informally, such that they enjoy each other and they trust each other. Like there is something that gets stripped away when you try to formalize something that should be informal. Right. And so I'm like this advocate for informal, organize game nights, invite your friends, have potluck, like talk to your neighbors, like just that it's like I think of it as like, how like roots stop soil from eroding because they hold the thing together. I feel like in social graphs, like informal networks kind of hold society together. And like when informal networks get eroded, then you have like, then fascism can roll in, like horrible shit can roll in. And whereas like elsewhere, it's like, if people know each other, you're like, hey, aren't you that guy's son? And that can go too far in some ways. Like if it's overly small city, it's like, cloistered and like people want to get away from that. But like just there's so much more we can do. It's a long ass rant, but yeah, you get it.
Now, there's so many things I feel like I could pick up on here. I loved your one of the ways I would describe what you're talking about is low time preference of not, I think that's, maybe a critique of society is we have high time preference. We want things right away. We want to get rich right away. I love your focus on kind of low time preference. And also, of course, people organizing kind of informally in communities, that's right up our alley, right? We have a strong local sensibility, but I would also say we have personally, I have a kind of cosmopolitan localist sensibility where I want strong local communities that take care of each other, that have, informal institutions and various things. But I also want communities to be connected to each other, networked. And I think that's what the internet can really do. And so you have kind of like the grounding of, really kind of fertile culture coming out of the small scale, but it's not isolated. It's not inward looking. There's this kind of tension, but I think it can be a creative tension between kind of the local and how that relates to the larger context of your country or your world or something. I really like that as well. But I want to shift this conversation a little bit. So the name of the podcast is Doomer Optimism, and kind of one way we describe it is like people these days are doomers for very different reasons, right? Some are climate ecology, some are political institutions, some are, worried about nuclear weapons or, what have you. There's all different reasons why people are doomers. And I'm wondering, do you have an inner doomer? Are there points where you're, say, worried about the viability of civilization in the next 100 years? And then, you can take that on to like, if you have some doomerism in you, where does the optimism come from that?
Right. Yeah, I would say that, like my kind of inciting experience, and I don't know if I'm over narrativizing this, but it feels true. So I think it's correct. Like when I was a teenager, and I guess again, like I mentioned, I used to read about ancient civilizations, right? So like where the fuck did they go? Like there were great grand monuments and beautiful, and they're gone. Like shit, that's a thing that happens, right? And then when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I learned about the Japanese occupation of Singapore, which happened in like World War II. And there was like this thing that happened with the currency. So like we had runaway hyperinflation with the Japanese currency. They printed more and just everything went to shit. And it's horrible for everybody involved. And like they taught this to us in class in school. And they just talked about it and then they just moved on to the next thing. And I'm like, my mind, I'm fucked up. I'm like, holy shit, money is fake.
Let's stop there. Let's dig into this.
They were like, okay, the next class we're doing math. I'm like, no, what the hell? Like money is, money is fictitious. Like it can all go to shit. Like, and I carried that with me since I was 10. Like I've just always been, oh my god, like what is money? Where does it come from? How do we? And then there were like economic crises, blah blah blah. And yeah, I think I've always just had this deep down sense that life is super fragile. I mean, life is fragile, like biologically. Like you can cross the street, you get hit by a car. You're always. One of my old jokes used to be, you're always one hard knock on the head away from being a totally different person, right? Like if you read about that, like that's another mindfuck. And there's multiple things like that. But yeah, I think the fabric of civilization is a very thin covering and like been less like you just read about war and all those things, like the things that people are capable of, and things can get really bad really fast. And I think particularly when I was a teenager, I was very troubled by that stuff. I still am troubled by it. And I would say that the sort of the knife's edge that stops me from being like Doomer on mean, right, is at some point I reflected and asked myself, like, who do I want in my life? You know, and I think this may have been influenced by things like if you watch Randy Pausch's last lecture, like he was a Carnegie Mellon teacher, and he gave this lecture about living his childhood dreams and helping other people live their childhood dreams. And he said something like, I mean, he was this kind of smart ass kid, you know, like arrogant and all those things. And he had a mentor who was sort of saying things like, you know, it's unfortunate that people perceive you the way you are because it's going to limit the positive impact that you can have on others. I mean, that's one of several things that I think shaped my way of thinking. But I don't know if I can find a path to where it started. I should reflect on this. But at some point, the way I frame it for myself now is, who do I want to spend my like dying days with? Like, who do I want to grow old with? Who's my crew? Who are my people? Who do I want on my side? And you know, I think I concluded that there's valuable stuff on either side, right? I do have a tweet about this. There's like there's people who are like, shit's going bad, fuck it, you know, fuck everything's not gonna, and those people can be searingly kind of honest and see things clearly and all of those things. And then on the like optimistic side, there's also people who are like, you know, just kind of cheery and like in that smarmy way, and they can be condescending and they can be kind of holier than thou. And so there's like good and bad people in every imaginable thing. But the thing that I really reflected on was just who do I want to be my friends? Who do I want as my peers? Like, let's assume that, okay, things are not going to get better. Like, things are going to get worse, and then it's all going to hell. Like, let's pretend that that's just definitely true. Like 200 years from now, everything's going to go to shit. So like in our lifetimes, everything's going to get worse and worse and worse, and then so on. Like, okay, then you have a choice. You can hang out with the like hedonistic people who want to party as everything goes to shit, or I mean, so I'm simplifying the choice in my head, or just for like thought experiment. Or I can look for the people who are trying to sort of ease the journey for other people, like kind of like, okay, we're and you know, it's like a fractal of death, even, right? Like, so even if life is going to get better and better and better, we're all going to die, you know, and other people are going to die as well, most likely. And so I found that I've always loved and admired people who take the trouble to sort of help other people have a better experience. And one of my favorite mental images for this is if you watch the Titanic movie, there's a scene where everyone's screaming and jumping and all that, and there's a musician who starts playing the violin for himself, and then his fellow musicians come and join him, and they sort of celebrate the end of existence together, and they witness each other, and you know, it's like it was an honor playing with you, gentlemen, right? And and that's what I want in life. I want to, assuming that things are going to hell, I still want fellow musicians to sort of commemorate it with. And I mean, I'm kind of going in circles, but like the core thing is, who do you want on your team, right? And I found that the people who are trying to make life better for other people, they are broadly the people that I want on my team. So it's like, by even if we know that everything's going bad, the people who choose to try their best. So I want to go down fighting, you know, like if we are all going down, I want to be like, you know, there's my brain's not bringing me like Pompeii. There's this guy who died in Pompeii jerking off. It's pretty funny. But like, just, you know, like if like civilization is going to be destroyed, I want to be at the front lines of people who are trying to help, right? That's kind of how I think about it. And the people who rush into the burning building, right, it's like you have that camaraderie. It's I don't even see it as like, oh wow, you're such a martyr, you're such self-sacrificing, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, there's some of that, but like, it's really the camaraderie you have with the other people who have that shared clarity of vision. Like, we are here to help people, you know. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's this beautiful story that's like very sad about soldiers, and I don't know if it's apocryphal, but it's probably happened at some point. Like this guy goes to rescue his buddy, And like his superior, his like sergeant or his captain is like, no, don't go, like you're not gonna make it. And then he goes there and he gets his buddy and he brings his buddy back. And he brings his buddy back and his buddy's dead already. Like his buddy's dead already. And now he's mortally wounded. And the captain's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? I told you not to go. Look, now he's dead and you're gonna die too. And then he said, no, I'm glad I did, because the last thing he said was, buddy, I knew you'd come for me. I was like, I really yeah. That, that's the kind of thing that, man, like, it's so deeply moving for me. I don't know if I can express it in a bunch of words, but like, that's how I want to live. And so that's what I do. It's like, even if everything is going to shit, I want to go down for my buddies, right? And then that gives me a sense of lightness day to day, which I don't necessarily feel I don't wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm gonna, but when I sit down to think about it and I reflect on how my life is going on, I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to find people, support them. And like, so the very doomer scenario that I painted, I don't think that's actually true. I don't think it's actually true that everything is going to go to hell. I think there's a chance that, we may come up with new technologies that we can't even imagine yet. And if you look at like pessimist archives, for example, there are things like people saying that we're not going to have human flight for millions of years, and then like 9 weeks later, the Wright brothers flew, right? Like we can't imagine what amazing things could happen that we don't know, right? There's always a possibility of new technology or new innovations or new things happening. I've always believed that there are loads, like sometimes you look around and you see nobody's doing anything, like there's not much being done, and you assume that everybody is apathetic and doesn't want to do anything. But it's also like, I think, so I have lots and lots of conversations with lots and lots of people, and I think a lot of people are like, if there is an opportunity to do something right and they believe that it will be for the better and like it will be valued and appreciated and like, in the right context, I think a lot of people will like come out of the woodwork to do the right thing. And I do seek out things that confirm my bias of this. Is like I have this whole thread of Dudes Rock where, it's like there was this one video of there's this like carnival thing shaking, like it's one of those big sort of like spinny things, and the whole thing's shaking, so it looks like it's gonna fall apart, and people are watching like in shock, like holy shit, like people are gonna die. Then one guy runs and jumps and holds on to the thing with his body weight, which is completely negligible to the massive thing. He does that, and the moment he does that, dozens of other guys show up and they all run and they all start piling on, right? And then it's like that for me is like, that's who I want to be with, And the first guy doing it, if he's the only one who ever does it and no one joins him, he looks like an idiot. But I would rather die being that guy, And the same thing, like you see like a car is on top of someone and like somebody rushes to try and help, and then everyone else realizes, oh, if we all do it together, it'll work, and then they all rush and all help together. It's like, it's that, it's coordination problems. People are not bad. It's just that it's the problems that we face are so large and complex that they don't really know if they can do anything. But once like somebody starts it, like it percolates that way. And yeah, so that's how I sort of decide to be on the other side of the knife's edge, kind of like let's make the most valiant attempt we can make to try and make things better. And if we fail, we kind of go out guns blazing, proud of each other, right? That's the best thing.
Nice. I mean, that really resonates, I think, how I think about Doomer Optimism, because we don't want to be naively optimistic. We want to really metabolize, these kind of, many X risks in society and challenges, but we want to, we can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to arise, as you said. And we want to, if it is going down, we want to go down fighting. And we want to, be taking responsibility for any parts of our lives that we can. And so that really resonates with me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think you pretty well encapsulated, one of my first threads about Doomer Optimism, why I said I was a Doomer Optimist, is that essentially I think, we're probably very far down the path of collapse. But I I can either say, basically, you mentioned in Titanic, right? There are there's kind of like different nodes. That's what makes like it's such a great movie. But part of it is he shows all these human responses, right? There's the old couple who just decide to just cuddle while they drown, right? And then you've got the quartet that you mentioned, right? And then you've got all the people frantically trying to save themselves. You know, you've got all these different responses to the same stimuli, really, the same external processes. I mean, this is one of the things that really animates what my work with Roots Down is you know, I sort of kind of identified that, like, the climate movement in particular is incredibly dour, filled with a lot of people screaming and yelling about how we're at the end of the world. And I thought, well, in all Hollywood adventure films, right, there's always a Han Solo. Like, there's always a character who's like, fuck it, we're gonna die. Let's go out quipping and shooting our guns everywhere, right? You know, in Guardians of the Galaxy, it's Rocket Raccoon, right? You know, there's always that character. And I thought that's really what the climate movement could use, is someone who's just like, yeah, I've internalized the doom. We're all gonna die. But if we're gonna try, if we have any chance of saving the world, let's have a damn good time doing it. Because I mean, we're saving the world. This is the coolest thing that, you know, a whole cohort of humans have had the chance to do. We can coordinate a global response that saves everybody. Like, this is amazing opportunity. We should be having a lot of fun doing it. And you know, that's where I've really kind of personally really come to the optimism side, is that, you know, I've already made my choice. If I'm going to die, you know, you guys have both said it, we're going to go down fighting, right? Otherwise, what's the point? You know, otherwise, then I should just cuddle with my family and drown with them, you know? Yeah. Those are really the two options in my view.
Yeah, totally agree. And, you know, it's really, when you kind of step back and you evaluate each variable influencing our current context, like, and I guess media diet really informs this. Like, so again, I grew up reading so many books and every book is an act of love and optimism from even like a pessimistic book, right? It's an act of optimism because you believe that other people are going to read and they're going to care, right? So it's every action is an optimistic act in a sense. And yeah, you know, just hearing about people, you know, if you watch travel shows and stuff, like, strangers love to help. Like, even when I visited San Francisco, so from Singapore, I went to the other side of the planet, I was so struck by how everybody that I met along the way was willing to, like, help me out or, you know, take care of me in some way. It's just so humanizing and warm. And I have friends who've, like, cycled across the US or cycled across India, and they all say this. It's like, just everyone's so nice to travelers, and you know, they want to help. And so I really get the sense that people are mostly broadly good. And at the same time, we know that the Holocaust happened. We know that, you know, genocides happen. People are capable of tremendous cruelty, and we can study that and try and figure it out and understand, okay, where's the insecurity? Where's the, you know, what are the emotional triggers that obviously there's, like, survival kind of, you know, like, there's something that makes people go absolutely batshit. We can study that, and we can prepare against it. And again, I feel like having people be enmeshed in networks of relationships with people that they see as human, I think it's like a bulwark against that sort of erosion into absolute madness. And we can read, like, people who lived through World War II and all those things, and they were like, you can, and again, if you read old memoirs, there are people who are like, in the 1800s, they're like, well, the world's probably going to end in like 3 years, so you know, so it's like that contextualizes things. You know, it's like people have always thought the end of the world is coming soon. It does have a kind of clarifying eschatology. I think it's like just this sense of, if things gonna end soon, it's less complicated, right? It's more complicated when you're like, oh, things are probably gonna stick around in some messy, ugly, janky ass way, which is probably the likeliest outcome. But yeah, I bring that up because it's just I just feel like people don't so the thing that makes me very excited and optimistic, while also kind of understanding people's pessimism, sort of, is that, you know, we haven't yet adapted. You know, and if you read, like, when the telephone first came out, people would call each other at all hours of the day, and they would not say, hello, who are you? Like, it took like a few years for people to devise, like, telephone etiquette. Like, okay, you should call around these times, like after dinner or before, like, and like people then coordinated, and eventually, like, healthy norms kind of emerged, more or less. Like, and we always see the frothing conflict zone scissor stuff where everyone's like, you know, what should you do on a date and whatever, like, it's chaos. But humanity has been if you ask me, like over time, getting better at coordinating. Like again, we were evolved for like bands of 150, 200-ish people, and now we're trying to coordinate at the scale of billions, and we're kind of doing pretty well at that. In the grand scheme of things, like it's clunky, it's messy, nation states, blah blah blah, but like we are, it's just, if you zoom out and you see the big picture, it's like people are trying their best, and a lot of people are kind of miscalibrated for legacy reasons, like just media. We haven't developed norms around healthy media diets. We will. I'm pretty sure we will. Like, it's not gonna be. You're not gonna have like multiple generations all like so. So part of what we're seeing, I think, is a generation of people who are kind of shell shocked by the not knowing how to respond to new media norms, and that was the case with television as well, I think. And so it's just the pendulum will swing back, and those of us who can see it and we're kind of clear-eyed live players, long game, we can kind of set things up in a way that just improves everyone's odds. So yeah, I do feel like and I feel like a lot, if you read Emerson, you read Montaigne, there were all these people, and even you consider like the prophets of like Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad, like they all were kind of gesturing at similar things about what healthy human wellness could be, but like their messages got so diluted and distorted because the comm stack was just not there. So it's like we have better comm stack, and I'm not going to claim that social media allows us to or some people will say Web3 is going to do it. I'm like, maybe, it's like but I think there's an ongoing struggle. It's been going on for thousands of years. It will probably go on for thousands of years after, but we do have a disproportionate ability to connect with other people that our predecessors did not have. So I always think about how Marshall McLuhan, so this was like I think 1920s ish, I hope I got the time right, he was writing to Ezra Pound, and he was saying something like, if only we could gather 10 good people together to have conversations and to think about the future of humanity and all of those things. And he's like, most people I talk to don't even see the need for this. And I'm like, he should have had Twitter. He didn't have that. And so it's like, we owe it to our predecessors we are the dreams of our predecessors, like very literally, like we are their progeny. We are not isolated beings floundering, thrust into existence out of nowhere. Like we are our legacy. We have an inheritance all the way back to Pericles and friends. I always recommend my friends read Pericles' funeral oration, because it's such abundance mindset. And like, if nobody else understands me, I'm doing this shit for Pericles, or just for all. And there have been all these guys and women as well, like just throughout history, who had this clear vision of how things can be better. And, they would have known that writing that shit down, it wasn't gonna guarantee that it would happen like in one generation later. So they were investing in hope and in faith in the next people. And we get to pick that up, and we get to move that forward. And like once you see life like that, it's such a meaningful life. It's so exciting. And yeah, again, even if we go down, like we go down as part of that crew. It's beautiful.
I feel like we're heading towards the hour 15 minute. I think we probably should start to wrap up with the ending kind of topics. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the domino meme.
All right.
I'm curious about which domino you think we're at right now, because I think like, you got love and curiosity, friendly, ambitious nerds, and high trust and high openness scene of exploration. I feel like we're knocking on that domino right now.
Yeah. Same.
So where do you think there was one Twitter commenter who mentioned, like, are there missing dominoes? Are there, other dominoes in between those? What are the dots that connect? What is going to knock the high trust, right, domino into nourishing and supportive medicine? Or is that kind of emerging? Is Doomer Optimism part of this? As a supportive medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of why the meme is so like resonates with people is that it does present a kind of linear and evocative sense of things can compound and get better and bigger and exciting. But like if you examine how things actually play out, it's much more fractal and complex, and like it goes in cycles and stuff. So it's even like love and curiosity within one individual, and then they talk to a bunch of people and they create a scene, and then it like circles back, like let's kind of incept love and curiosity in more people. And it does feel like to get to, so we might have like, I think we can reasonably claim that we have a pretty good high trust scene amongst ourselves, amongst our Twitter friends. But like, you know, you want more of those scenes independently to emerge elsewhere. And so you kind of want to seed that and you know, come up with a like a framework, and you know, the information exists historically, people figured it out, but like we kind of have to repackage it for in our contemporary language for people. So you want to cycle back and have like, so my current frame is like I want to focus on the friendly ambitious nerds domino actually, and be like the shorthand I'm using for myself is mint 100 Erasmuses. So I don't know if you guys know Erasmus, Desiderius Erasmus. He was he was a Dutch scholar. So he was like born in, he's kind of like Alexander Hamilton. Like his parents died when he was young, and he was kind of penniless, and he was a nerd. And he ended up just being really, really prolific. And he's like writing letters all over Europe. And he ended up being kind of like a proto friendly ambitious nerd in that time. And same for Mersenne. They called him the postbox of Europe, because like he was like, he did some math, but like he was pivotal in, you know, helping like Galileo reach prominence, helping a bunch of like, he was just the switchboard of that time. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you see how these individuals aren't even all that famous, and I want to help to correct that a little bit, like just to entrench their legacy. And also, and it's not about them as they're dead, right? So, but it's not about their ego. It's about helping more people see that these sort of switchboard roles are very, very powerful, and they can facilitate tremendous flourishing around them, and have more and more people do that. So I want soon, right, to kind of mint 100 Erasmuses, 100 Mercens, 100 like really high agency switchboard people, in like one in every major city at least, you know. And I have like a few people in New York, a few people in San Fran, a few people in London. Like I'm just trying to make sure that anybody in any major city in the world has access to someone like that who's connected to the rest of the network, right? And this is kind of informally sort of happening, and I don't want to formalize it, but I want to be deliberate about it. So I want to really be like, you know, in my personal journal, like, ooh, you know, I'm gonna have who's my China guy, who's my Japan guy, you know, who's my Ogo, right? Who's my Indonesians, who's my Thais, who's my, you know, people in South Africa. Like I just want to make sure that there are people in every major city who function as the postbox of those respective cities that can. And then I think I assume that when we have that kind of critical mass, like the next domino will almost happen by itself. But you know, or you know, when we reach that stage, like, so sometimes people ask me like, how do you go from scene to meta scene? I'm like, I don't really know, and I don't really care yet, because I don't have enough people who are already dealing with that. So when I have enough people who are like tending to multiple scenes, and I kind of hear similar issues from other people, and I can kind of like abstract one layer out, then I guess I'll start thinking about the next thing in more detail. But yeah, and I would say that a meta scene is just a city is a meta scene, but it's constrained by geography. So a city, like in any given city, there are multiple scenes happening at the same time, but we are no longer constrained by geography. So you could think of it as a web city, or a mind city, or you know, idea city, or whatever. I do use the phrase mind city quite a lot organically. Like, and a mind city is just paved with great thoughts between people across space, right? So you can have a mind city of thoughts, and that is uneven. It can be distributed, however. But yeah, I would, you know, when people ask how do I get involved, how do I whatever, and it's very much like pretty local. It's like, you know, who are your coolest friends, and have you introduced them to each other? If no, why not? You know, like everyone knows like a dozen great people, and very often I find that people don't even spend much time with the people that they admire and respect most, usually because they're a bit nervous, like, oh, they're so great, they're so busy, they're so, you know, like I'm just some guy. But like, those people are people too, and they want to hang out with other great people as well. And you can introduce the best people you know to the other best people you know, and that is one of the highest leverage things you could do. You know, so like a Tyler Cohen says that one of the greatest things you can do is raise people's aspirations, which is true. And also a way to raise people's aspirations is to put them next to other people with high aspirations, so that they have this Lennon-McCartney sort of relationship. So another way of thinking about this is how do we seed 100,000 Lennon-McCartney relationships, like, again, because we have the network now. Like, it's not that like I'm a better networker than whoever introduced the two of them. Is that I have Twitter, and we are the dreams of our predecessors made flesh. So we should really seek the best people and introduce them to each other. And here, I guess I want to talk a little bit about elitism, where like I sometimes hear from people saying, oh, why are you focused on like the most high agency, most smart, most whatever, most XYZ people? And I do think I've seen a few. So I've participated in many communities over the years, and I do feel like excellence is something that must be encouraged and celebrated. It shouldn't be gatekept. So I don't believe in like we will only welcome people from these domains. It's really like the chef in Ratatouille was like, greatness can come from everywhere. But we are talking about greatness. A great chef can come from anywhere. And not everyone can be a great chef, but a great chef can come from anywhere. And similarly, like not everyone can fulfill these roles, which is like very high octane, very high whatever. But it can be anyone, like male, female, trans, gay, doesn't matter. It's like just as long as you're willing to do the work and you're capable of it, like I want to encourage you. And I want to focus on the tip of the spear people, not because like I wish I could help everyone. I really do. I wish I could give personal one-to-one attention to every single kid that wants it. But like I can't, so I have to prioritize. And choosing not to prioritize is like prioritizing at random. Whereas if I choose to prioritize the people who I think are likeliest to kind of share my values and likeliest to pass on that kind of knowledge to the next person, then you have like this tree of, you focus on the top 10 people, and they focus on the next top 10 people, and they focus on the next top 10 people, and that ends up being way more productive than like let's just randomly be friends with everyone. And again, like, so my first book's called Friendly Ambitious Nerd, and this is like the ambition component. And it's totally fine to be a friendly nerd who has no ambition. Like, it's great, you can be a lovely member of your community. You don't need to like push yourself to do this grand scale work. Like, if you just being a good friend to your friends around you, taking care of yourself, and like not imposing your nonsense on other people, like that's already a great gift. But if we want to beat push bigger and bigger dominoes, we have to find the people who are like the highest leverage points in their social graphs, introduce them to each other, challenge each other, and so on.
Yeah, we should. I think we would be remiss if we didn't. I don't think we mentioned the last two dominoes that we're aiming for. So we went up to nourishing and supportive medicines, shift in global consciousness, golden age for humanity. So high aspirations here. Well, I aspire to be your switchboard person in Southern Appalachia. So that's my humble aspiration right there.
Yes,
for sure. Before we wrap up, are there any questions that you wish we had asked you that, or you wish somebody would ask you and that you would want to respond to?
No, that was overall great. What do I wish somebody would ask me? I have some things like this. I wish, so a thing that I can't, like the optics of it is a little bit weird. And, I'm grateful that Tress earlier pointed out that like, what I do, I try to be egoless. I try. And I guess I wish people would ask more about how do I express this? So I do genuinely think that what I'm doing is uncommon and good, and maybe it's just too early for people to see it. You guys see it, I'm sure, but like it's not something that's very obvious or very visible at a very large scale yet. And it's partially by choice, because I do think that the trade-offs that you make along the way, you can make trade-offs for greater visibility. But the issue there is if you grow too fast too soon and you use messaging that's too simple, you get inundated with like kind of low effort, like clicky. And again, I don't mean to condescend to anybody who makes those decisions. Like if you want to be an author for like a very popular author, you can. But I guess I want to challenge people to try and it's kind of meta. I want to challenge people to challenge people. I guess that's what I wish. Like, I don't know if that perfectly fits the ask me question, but it's like I want to challenge. So it's difficult for me to say this in a Twitter thread because it would come across as kind of like, is he just virtue signaling or something? But like, I think in voice and in person, it's more obvious that when I mean it, I really mean it. I want people to who are capable. So if you're, if you're struggling with your family and blah, 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 then like no pressure there. But if you're capable, and also sometimes having a challenge like that can push a person, if they are inspired, it can drive them to rise above their station, and that can really help. But anyway, I want to challenge people to challenge themselves and challenge each other to be greater. And here people get into things like, oh, what do you mean by great? Like, isn't it subjective? I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, different people have different ideas. And when I say great, I mean, it's like, in your heart what matters to you and what you think is beautiful and what you think is great. And like, again, I don't mean you should try to be great in someone else's eyes. I mean, like, you reflect on what's valuable to you, reflect on your favorite stories, on your favorite things from history that you think is beautiful and great. And from there, you synthesize your sense of what a profoundly beautiful, wonderful life would be for, like, in relation to others. And then challenge yourself to do that, and amongst your friends who are receptive to it. So don't beat them over the head with it, right? But like, try and challenge your friends as well. And yeah, I guess I wish more people would ask me to challenge them, sort of, because like, I don't want to go around like beating people over the head, like, hey, be great, be ambitious. Like, no, if you're pushy about it and if you're like needy about it, I think it can be kind of like a dark energy that's hostile, and people feel like they're not worthy or they don't live up to those things. And like, no, I mean, I do believe, we should welcome and accept people for who they are, and we can also challenge ourselves to be better, right? So it's that, like, let's all challenge each other. I want to be challenged more as well, right? Like, just this sense of I think we all compare ourselves subconsciously to like the people around us, and like, we could be competing, as Ogilvy said, for the company of immortals, right? We could really, what we do could be so great that for the rest of history, people point at us and be like, shit, those guys fucking did it, And it's like, it happens like for the time being, like, let's not even talk about like greatest of all time for all history. Like, let's talk about, Pericles Athens, Shakespeare's London, Renaissance Florence. Like, there's just these few clusters, the Gupta Golden Age in India, Dutch Golden Age during the time of Descartes and so on. Like, there are these clusters where people do great things that serve humanity for centuries onwards, right? I think when you look back at history, it's tempting to think that, oh, human progress is kind of slow and steady and, like, whatever. But if you zoom in, you see that these peak golden age periods in where like there's this tremendous learning and growth and development in small pockets of time, like in Baghdad during the House of Wisdom era and so on. They invent algebra, and in India they invent zero. These things happen very sharp spikes in very short amount of time relative to all of history. And yeah, like, we can do that. That's amazing. Like, it's like, I think I once in an inter-intellect salon that I was hosting, I was like, somebody asked some question that annoyed me, and I responded with, look, do you want to increase your lifetime revenue by 5%, or do you want to live fucking gloriously? Do you want to? And then like, everyone's like, everyone clapped, not exactly, but it's just I surprised myself when that came out, and it just felt like a really, the social pressures around us, or like just the mainstream narratives and everything. Like, oh, you should try and optimize things a little bit. You should try and make a bit more money. You should try and be a bit more productive. I'm like, yeah, sure. But like, you really dig deep inside your own heart about what feels amazing to you in terms of, and then like seek that out in other people. And when, it's like each person has a small flame inside them, and in concert, it can become like this bonfire. And, like I even say, like, on Twitter, if those of us on Twitter do an amazing job, it will percolate beyond Twitter, right? Like, people on Reddit will be posting screenshots of the tweets, and people on YouTube will be making videos about some amazing shit is going on Twitter right now. Like, all these really smart people are being really productive and whatever. Like, we can do that. Like, we can, like, people don't think that far ahead and they don't zoom out and see the big picture. But if we challenge ourselves, we can be fucking amazing. And let's be fucking amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, in the spirit of that, how would you challenge Doomer Optimism?
I mean, so my default challenge is always just be more prolific. Just talk to more people, and I think the thing that's slightly uncomfortable might be to have like social goals, like, and again, like, some people are too networky about it and be like, I don't want to, but like, at least internally articulate for yourselves, like, who are all the people that you would really want to talk to? So dare to dream, right? And not necessarily be like, okay, we're gonna do unethical things, or we're gonna go and wait in someone's lobby and harass them until they speak to us. But just be like, who are all the people that Duma Optimism should speak to, and what are all the, and then like you list that out, and then you kind of figure out the steps along the way. So it's like a dominoes thing for yourselves, right? Like just what is the current stage? What if you 10x that? What if you 10x that again? And you don't need to be in a rush to do it, but just being willing to expand your imagination and your sense of history and your sense of scale. I think that is the challenge, right? Like just being like, it's so easy to feel like, oh, if we are too ambitious, like people are gonna call us like, glory seeking, and that is something to be mindful of. So you might not want to like tweet about it like, oh, Duma Optimism is going to speak to XYZ. Like, it's more of a internally kind of like workshop it. So yeah, be careful not to let like the things that you do to be a decent person to other people, right? So we don't bash people over the head with like, we are dreaming so big, why aren't you? Like not that, but like just cultivate space within yourself. And this actually ties back to what I was saying earlier about like 20 minutes once a week, do what you love. And also like 20 minutes once a week, like dream fucking big. Just it even if you don't necessarily the next day do that, right? It just stretches your mind, and it stretches your sense of self, and contextualizes your life. And I think from there you'll figure it out.
Nice. I'm trying to think of a way that we could challenge you, but it seems like you're already kicking ass and taking names. But I see that as a personal challenge of I'm going to find a way to challenge Visa in a way that he'll.
Hell yes.
So I'm gonna think
Hell
about
yes. That. I look forward to that.
You even managed a way to integrate your mock Twitter account. The Twitter account that was mocking you. You ended up being their largest marketing referral source.
Right.
So you're very difficult to directly critique, because you're so open to the critique. And incorporate. And
it's actually so haters. This is a freebie. Like haters are your biggest fans in some ways, because they have the persistence that regular fans don't. And you don't necessarily have to reject anything anybody says. So the beautiful thing about like agree and amplify is when somebody says something like, "Oh, you're fucking stupid," and then you're like, you want to be like, "No, I'm not stupid. What the fuck? No, fuck you." But instead you're like, "Yes, I'm stupid," and that's great, because that's how I make mistakes and I learn from them. And so it's like you accept the utterance, but you don't accept the assumption behind it. You don't accept that, being imperfect or being whatever, it has to define you, and that you have to be bad about it. And so when you welcome that, and you're willing to like, let's play with it, and let's what if this was true, and what if it was good, and all of that. And my funny thing with the guy who was mocking me was that he repeated my talking points all the time, and I agreed with like 80% of what he was saying, and like 20% of what he was saying was kind of like just this shallow assumptions about like what my motivations were, which is not true. And he actually gave me multiple opportunities where his misunderstandings of me actually helped me make good content. Like, so he called me elitist, and I made a video about elitism because it gave me a chance to think about it and explain that. So it's like all my haters are my collaborators. It's like they help me refine my message, they help me do that. And so ultimately that guy deleted his account, which is like I'm in two minds about, because on one hand I hope that having repeated everything that I say all the time, he internalized it, and he's like, oh no, this is not how I want to live. I want to live my best life. I really hope he's living his best life now. But on the other hand, he repeated my talking points, but he couldn't repeat the spirit of long games, right? So long games means you have to do it for years. So if you did it for less than a year, it doesn't count, So it's like playfully, I would, if I could bring him on, I would love to chat with him if I could. I don't know if I can find him somehow, since he's deleted his account, but he might still be watching from some other account. But yeah, if he's hearing this post-rat musings, I would love to chat with you. Like again, like all my haters are my collaborators, whether they realize it or not. That's a good tweet. I'm gonna tweet that after this.
Yeah. Well, we like to end. We obviously want to give the guests the last words. So if you have one kind of parting bit of wisdom, or something you really want to make sure that you get onto the podcast, now's your chance.
Well, yeah, I guess I just circled around it a few times, which is, so I talk a lot about heart, right? And I think that's something that, especially like the intellectual, so there are a lot of like intellectual nerdy folks, and I really think that like there is something called heart, and like maybe it's like some kind of emotion somewhere in the brain, I don't know, emotional limbic system stuff. I don't care about the technical specifics, but we know what it's like to feel open-hearted. We know what it's like to feel half-hearted. We know what it's like to just feel kind of down. And I really, advise everyone to dig into their strongest feelings throughout their lives. Like what moved you, what pissed you off, what upset you. Like really get in tune with those things. Like so sometimes people ask me, like, how do you remember so much shit? And it's like the thing is, I weave my thoughts to my emotions. It's like, what do I feel about something? Like, is this interest me? Do I feel an affinity towards these things? Does this surprise me? Does this upset me? And like internal emotional literacy, when you sort that shit out, it's like this turbo fuel that you can plug everything else into, and it can interface with people really well. And yeah, so get in tune. Again, like the phrase "get in tune with your emotions" is it's like a phrase that's become kind of stale, and people are like, yeah, I'm sure, like, yeah. But no, I mean, like, what broke your heart when you were a child? What really pissed you off? What really, what's your deal? Like, really, if you, I don't think it's realistic for everyone to wake up every morning like fucking on fire, but you should be able to access that state if you want to, and if you can't, chances are there's something you can do to help you access that state. And it's like, once you live like that, it's like you never want to go back. So I guess that's what I want to encourage people. Like, really find the flame within yourself. It's still there, even if you're, if it feels cold and boring or listless and lonely, whatever. Like there's still something that's like, something that sets your heart on flame, and you can find it. You should find it.